With Geno Smith and Sam Howell at the helm, the Seahawks look to be in good shape at the quarterback position for the upcoming season. But could they seek out an upgrade next offseason? We're going to dive into a hypothetical that seems to be gaining steam in the NFL community here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thanks for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're nearby in Vancouver, Washington, or across the country in Storrs, Connecticut, we appreciate each and every one of you. We thought we had 6 weeks until the start of training camp, but guess what? It's going to be coming earlier. It's like they moved Christmas up a couple weeks for NFL fans. Rookies reporting for the Seahawks on July 17th. Guess what? That's less than a month from today. So we have a lot to get to over the next several weeks. We really got a 4.5 week window here, Rob, until we are going to have the Seahawks back on the practice field for the return of training camp. Keeping that in mind, we're going to start off our training camp preview talking quarterbacks. We'll continue our 90-man countdown with numbers 73 through 71 and much more. This episode coming your way courtesy of FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's fitting that this conversation is going to be happening on the day that we kick off our training camp preview, looking at the quarterback position for the Seahawks. Geno Smith, Sam Howell, and now PJ Walker forming a pretty solid 1-2-3 punch for the Seahawks on the depth chart for 2024. And yet there continue to be discussions both by fans and media members, your experts out there, that the Seahawks don't necessarily have their long-term quarterback on the roster. And meanwhile, down in Dallas, the Cowboys have a difficult situation brewing with their Pro Bowl and former All-Pro quarterback, Dak Prescott. He was already franchise tagged once. The team can't necessarily afford to do it a second time. There is a chance Dak Prescott is going to hit the free agent market next year. And of course, the Seahawks have been named, Bill Barnwell being one of the experts out there that's thrown the Seahawks out there as a possibility. And I will just say this, Rob, if you look towards 2025, I don't think it's impossible to see a scenario where the Seahawks could potentially kick the tires on making a huge move to get Dak Prescott. I think it's unlikely, and yet we know this is a league where things can change very quickly. And at the quarterback spot, who knows where things stand next year for the Seahawks?
Yeah, I think that is well said. I think that initially when I heard Dak Prescott being linked to the Seahawks, I kind of just chuckled. And I thought there's no chance of that. But, as you said, Corbin, I mean, you're talking about a quarterback in Dak Prescott who is a former All-Pro, multiple Pro Bowler, obviously has had a great deal of individual and team success with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Cowboys fans would be among the very first to mention the fact that he hasn't won a Super Bowl. But, of course, neither is Geno Smith, Sam Howell, or PJ Walker. And, Dak Prescott has had an awful lot of success in the NFL. He's 6'2", he's 238 pounds. He's got roughly a 3-to-1 career touchdown to interception ratio. And he has done it at a high level for an awful long time. He is a dual threat quarterback, so he would fit in a little bit with some of the system that we have seen Ryan Grubb have obviously a great deal of success with in the past. Now for Dak Prescott to be somebody the Seahawks would have to consider, then I think for one, he is going to have to disappoint this upcoming season in Dallas, because we know that Jerry Jones is aging and looking to win a Lombardi trophy himself. So if he really thinks that Dak Prescott it doesn't matter how much money he has to throw at Dak Prescott, he still would figure out a way to do so. So obviously Dak Prescott would have to play poorly enough that the Dallas Cowboys want to go in a different direction. And of course, that also means that Geno Smith or perhaps Sam Howell also disappoint in Seattle for the Seahawks to turn their attention to a very spendy free agent addition. But at the same time, Mike McDonald, of course, has no real allegiance to Geno Smith or Sam Howell or PJ Walker for that matter. And the expectations in Seattle are very high, just like they are in Dallas. And so if the Seahawks do stumble, and if there is a all-pro caliber quarterback out there available to them, then I think that there is a possibility, even if it's a slight possibility, that the Seahawks might be considering somebody like a Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I think that this would require Geno Smith to go out and just bomb the 2024 season and Sam Howell not show any progress. Because if you look at the past track record for John Schneider, this does not strike me as a move that, I mean, I know he never leaves a stone unturned, but this does not strike me as something that he's going to be rushing to do. I mean, they're projected to be over the cap as things stand right now in 2025, and that could be remedied very quickly. I mean, Geno Smith has a contract that's friendly in terms of unloading him for the final year of his contract. Sam Howell's barely making above league minimum as a former fifth-round pick. So you have pieces that you can move around, but we're talking a quarterback that's looking for $50+ million per year. And he has been really good, but I don't know. I still don't see him as an elite quarterback. I don't. I think he is in that next group. And to be honest with you, I think when Geno Smith's playing at his very best, he is in the same group that Dak Prescott is, and the statistics bear it out. You look at the numbers here, Rob. Geno Smith actually has more passing yards. Dak Prescott has 9 more touchdowns, but he's also thrown 4 more picks. They're very similar at completion rate. Passer rating is very similar. Geno Smith had more rushing yards, and according to Pro Football Focus, Geno Smith has 10 more big-time throws the last 2 years. You put those numbers side to side. This is not a small sample size. This is 2 full seasons. And you can make a very strong argument that these two quarterbacks should be lumped together in the same category. Geno Smith's making $25 million per year. Prescott's wanting twice as much as that. Is he potentially a slightly better quarterback? If he was asking for a couple $1 million more per year, then I think John Schneider could sit there and significantly entertain the possibility of this because, hey, he might be able to get us over the hump and we can win some playoff games. But if you're looking at that double the price tag, the investment, you're not going to get the return on your investment compared to what Geno Smith has done. So I think the probability of this actually happening, I would say, is under 0.05%. As I mentioned earlier, we don't know how the league is going to operate year to year. The Seahawks could be in a position where they feel like we've got to make a major swing for the fences at quarterback. And then John Schneider, maybe there's some desperation. Maybe his job is starting to be on the line, depending how this year plays out. That is the only way, though, I see this happening. And quite frankly, common sense tells me there's no way you should do it. This is just my opinion. I just don't think that the numbers there, he's not much younger than Geno Smith either. It's not like you're bringing in a 28-year-old QB in his prime. These guys are very similar age-wise, and they have been almost identical production-wise the last 2 years. I'm not paying double the price for that. I'm sorry, but I'm not.
Yeah, and I'm not either. I don't think that Jody Allen is either, most importantly, of course, for the Seahawks. Dak Prescott is 3 years younger than Geno Smith, but that might be what he is in his birth certificate. But, of course, Dak Prescott's played an awful lot of NFL football and has been beaten up because of it, whereas Geno Smith, has played quite as much NFL football. And to your point with the big-time throws especially, Corbin, I think that, as I often say, the proof is in the pudding, and we have seen Geno Smith make big-time throws over and over again. Dak Prescott is a very good player. But to your point, I think if you're talking about two quarterbacks who are basically at the same level, and so why would you pay a player twice as much money that has no ties to the community, no upside, no kind of resiliency factor, at least not the way that Geno Smith has kind of, just become a leader in your locker room the way that Geno Smith has. So I I would echo what you just said. I think that we're talking about 0.05% chance of this taking place. But at the same time, this is the offseason. I remember about a year ago, and there's a lot of Seattle Mariners fans who were dreaming about the possibility of Shohei Ohtani might wind up signing with the club. So I liked your kind of swing for the fences analogy that you mentioned before. But I think that's essentially what this is. It's a pipe dream that the Seahawks are basically going to be all in with Geno Smith. And if everything falls apart, then the Seahawks are going to have all kinds of big conversations about what they might be doing. I think the significantly more likely scenario would be either just going to a former NFC East quarterback like Dak Prescott, but with the guy that you already have on the squad in Sam Howell at that quarterback position, and perhaps drafting a quarterback rather than spending all of your money on a free agent in Dak Prescott, or a pending free agent, I should say, in Dak Prescott, and a guy who maybe is not, is basically at the top of his career and might be starting to slide downward, rather than somebody who is ascending, like, again, a college prospect or Sam Howell.
If Geno Smith didn't have the numbers to back it up, then this is a different conversation. But why would you hamstring the rest of your roster building process, bringing in a quarterback that really, I'm just saying this bluntly, he has been a carbon copy in many ways to Geno Smith the last 2 years. You're getting a guy that's a couple years younger, but it's also had a broken leg and a couple of other significant injuries, and he's played a lot more snaps. So I just don't think it would make any sense. And I think if the season unravels to the point you need to go that route, you're probably picking in the top 5, and you can go out and get a quarterback on a rookie contract. So it just seems very unlikely. I'm not going to say it's impossible. It seems unlikely, though, at the very least. When we come back, we're going to keep talking quarterbacks. We're going to look at the players that are on Seattle's roster, kicking off our training camp preview. We're a month away from report day for the rookies. We're going to be diving into that quarterback group, expectations for all 3 players, where they fit in. We'll get to that up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode of Locked On Seahawks is coming your way courtesy of FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, lots of baseball. We've still got the Stanley Cup and much more. You can bet on it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200, win or lose. Who will be the first pick in the upcoming NBA draft, with the Atlanta Hawks slated to pick first overall? Does Aaron Judge have another home run coming tonight for the Yankees? Will Connor McDavid score at least one to help the Oilers alive in the Stanley Cup Finals when they're facing elimination in Florida? You can bet on all of this in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big victory to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. Continuing to talk quarterbacks, it may seem crazy that here we are before June 20th, that we're going to start our preview for training camp. But, Rob, the Seahawks are going to have their rookies reporting. Was announced today officially by the NFL on July 17th. That's less than a month from today. So training camp is coming quickly. That means we've got a ton of stuff to knock out of the park in terms of our preview, whether it's position groups, key storylines, burning questions. We're going to have it all over the next 4 weeks leading up to the start of the 2024 season. So we got to start at the quarterback spot. And it's fitting. We just had this discussion about potentially splurging on Dak Prescott next year. Again, you and I are in agreement that seems very unlikely that John Schneider would do that. I guess if John Schneider has a really bad year and he gets fired and they replace him, who knows what ends up happening next year. But right now, Seattle, maybe they don't have the best quarterback situation in the NFL, but I think there are a lot of teams that would envy Seattle's depth chart. You got a 2-time Pro Bowler in Geno Smith. You've got a young quarterback in Sam Howell with 18 career starts before his 24th birthday. So you've got the older vet, the wily vet that's overcome so much. You've got a young guy that you feel like could be a potential long-term quarterback. And PJ Walker, he's won some games as a quarterback in the NFL, is your third stringer. I think when you look at this group as a whole, I think from top to bottom, the 3 quarterbacks that Seattle has, maybe they don't have a top 10 starting quarterback. I think that's debatable when Geno Smith's playing his very best. But I think in terms of a quarterback room, this is a top 10 quarterback room going into this season.
Yeah, again, well said. I really think that there are an awful lot of NFL teams out there that would gladly trade places and have Seattle's quarterback room. Geno Smith and the success that he's had over the last couple of seasons remains one of the most inspirational storylines in all of the NFL, in my opinion. There are very few games over the last couple of seasons, Corbin, that you could pinpoint and say the Seahawks lost that game because number 7 didn't play well enough. And I think that you can pinpoint several games in which you could say that that the Seahawks won that game because Geno Smith made a clutch throw, as evidenced by the fact that he led the NFL in fourth quarter comebacks this past season. So again, that speaks for itself, as you said, with Sam Howell and just the starting experience that he possesses, the upside that he has as a young quarterback who has all the physical tools that you're looking for. And then PJ Walker, oh, by the way, is the only of the 3 quarterbacks that actually has a winning record in the NFL. Now, his touchdown to interception ratio is not very impressive. There's a reason why he is viewed as a number 3 quarterback here, but still, the reality is that he's been in the league for 4 years. He has started at least one game all 4 of those years. And so there is something to be said about his leadership ability, his dual threat potential as well. So I do think that this is a quarterback room the Seahawks are very confident in. And I think that there is all the reason to believe that if Ryan Grubb's offense fits into the NFL as seamlessly as we all hope, if you are a follower of the Seahawks, then Geno Smith might just be getting warmed up. This really could be a pretty special season here, especially consider the talent that he has around him, and at least in terms of his pass catchers, the running backs behind him. A big question is, of course, going to be what kind of protection the Seahawks have for him. But when Geno Smith has been protected the last couple of years in Seattle, he has shown the pinpoint accuracy to return to the Pro Bowl, of course, if the NFL decides to actually have one.
Yeah, we know that lately, the last couple of years, they haven't played the game. Their actual game is not coming back. It's going to continue to be the way that it is now, where it's going to be showcase events and a flag football game. But nonetheless, it's still meaningful to have a Pro Bowl on your resume. Geno Smith's got 2 of them here. And a lot of times when you're looking at a new coaching staff and a new offensive coordinator, both those things being coupled together, the quarterback has so much on their plate trying to learn the new scheme. And that's certainly true for all 3 of these quarterbacks. But Geno Smith has one thing that you can already see is paying major dividends for him. It is the continuity at the skill positions. Were there a few changes at tight end? Yeah, but he's still got Noah Fant, who was his number 1 tight end. Jack Westover, the undrafted rookie out of Washington, has played in Ryan Grubb's offense. He's been leaning a lot on Jack Westover, which makes a compelling case for keeping him around potentially once the season gets there. We'll get to that position group on another day, but Geno Smith has that continuity at the receiver position, at the running back position. He's got his top tight end returning. When you have all those players you've already built chemistry with, and guys like Jack Smith and Jigba, who your chemistry is only getting better by day, and you're building more trust in him, that is going to make the process learning a new offense much more of a smooth one. And we have seen that to this point on the practice field. Geno Smith has been winging the football around. Have there been a few days he's thrown multiple interceptions? Yes. But if you were actually at the practice watching, a lot of those happen not because of bad decisions or poor throws. They were great plays on the defensive side. And oh, by the way, if interceptions are not happening at practices, then you've got another problem there. You have got to be working on your concepts and your aggressive downfield throws. You're going to throw some picks. But I thought he had a fantastic offseason. So you're looking at a QB that already looks very comfortable in Ryan Grubb's scheme. And I think a big part of that has been the receivers that he already had that chemistry with. They're all growing up together now in this offense. Whereas Sam Howell, I think there's been a lot more bumps in the road to this point because he doesn't have that continuity. He doesn't have anybody he played with the Commanders last year that is on this roster. He is starting truly from scratch with all the receivers, tight ends, the running backs that he has. He's learning a new offense on top of it. Geno Smith has learned 6 offenses in the NFL previously. Sam Howell's had different coordinators, but he is not near as well versed in these changes and all the different terminologies for similar concepts. So it is going to take longer. I am going to be watching him closely during the early stages of training camp to see how that progression goes in terms of chemistry with his new weapons, some of the second string guys he's going to be playing with, the offensive line, because it was a rocky up and down offseason program. And that should have been expected because, as I said, he is dealing with all new things here. Whereas Geno Smith, he still had that docket of receivers that he knows so well from throwing 20 touchdowns last year, 30 the year before. A lot of those same receivers are still on the field, and that has made things a lot easier for him, whereas Sam Howell, he truly did start from scratch. So I think people need to halt the brakes a little bit if they're wondering, well, he's struggling. He's not a guy that could be a long-term answer. I think it is way too early to be making proclamations like that with a guy that has physical tools and talent, but he's trying to swim right now in a nasty current that's called learning a new NFL offense and all brand new receivers. It takes time.
It does take time. And as you said, I think if you're not throwing interceptions, then you are checking down. That's the thing is I went to an awful lot of Seahawks practices, Corbin, when Charlie Whitehurst, for example, was throwing the football, and he did not throw very many interceptions, in part because very few of his passes travel more than 10 yards down the field. Geno Smith is aggressive, and he's got terrific accuracy deep downfield. And that, to me, is one of the things that we saw Ryan Grubb's offense excel at, of course, with Michael Penix Jr. This past season for the University of Washington. And so it's so easy to just imagine Geno Smith in Ryan Grubb's offense, and then to actually go to the mini camps, as both you and I were there. And while it wasn't Geno Smith's best day, at the same time, you did see the recognition of defenses. You saw the fact that he understood where his wide receivers were. And again, for the most part, and it was a very windy day, the day that I was there, but still, you saw the confidence to be able to feather the ball in, whether it required velocity, whether it required touch. Geno Smith has demonstrated that these last couple of seasons. And so I feel very confident that Geno Smith is, again, going to be challenging for career highs in terms of touchdown throws and in passing yards, completion percentage, all of those things, because I do believe in Ryan Grubb's offense. I do believe in especially the wide receiver talent that the Seahawks have. And then I definitely have I had no choice but to believe in Geno Smith's accuracy because, again, he's proven it over the past couple of seasons, while he himself, like Sam Howell, was dealing with a little bit of a lack of continuity at the wide receiver position. Of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba being kind of pushed into the starting lineup a year ago in Shane Waldron's offense, and it took some time for him to develop that chemistry, but he certainly has it now. And so, again, one of the reasons why I am bullish on Geno Smith's potential this upcoming season. And again, I remain very high on Sam Howell as well, but at least from my perspective, what I saw, it was very much Geno Smith was the varsity, so to speak. Sam Howell was playing JV. He just was not as pinpoint accurate as Geno Smith was. And so I understand all the buzz about Sam Howell or Dak Prescott or even a PJ Walker possibly being somebody that might push Geno in the future. Right now, it's very clearly Geno Smith's team. And again, I think the Seahawks fans should be damn excited about that.
Yeah, there's no drama here in terms of who's going to be making the roster. Geno Smith is starting. Sam Howell is going to be your backup. They've invested the draft picks they swapped to get him. He's a guy they've loved since his days at North Carolina. Really, the only drama, I guess, here is what happens with PJ Walker, because the rules were changed last year to allow teams to have a third quarterback available that doesn't count against the 46-man limit on game day. Now, that player has to be on the 53-man roster. You can't do that from the practice squad. So will the Seahawks buck past trends under Pete Carroll and decide, hey, we do want to have three quarterbacks that are on our 53-man roster? Or are they going to try to cut him and stash him on the practice squad? Or will somebody else pick him up? So that's really the only drama here. But we want to see how these guys, Geno Smith, Sam Howell, and PJ Walker, are able to really dive into this offense. Once the pads come out, the bullets start flying, what do we see these guys play like running Ryan Grubb's scheme with all the weapons that they're going to have at their disposal? And so it's going to be a fun position to watch, even though it doesn't feel like there's any major question marks in terms of who's going to be playing. It's going to be looking at that fit on offense and how they're able to master this new scheme. When we come back, we're going to continue our 90-man countdown. We've got numbers 73 through 71, a few veteran players on the list after we've basically been covering all undrafted guys. We'll get to that up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back, 12s. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Morang. And a special thanks to all the 12s that are tuning in. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you're tired of having to turn the volume down because of the nonstop shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for your everyday needs to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We had a little bit of a lull in the 90-man countdown because minicamp happened last week, so we took a few days off, but we got it rolling again yesterday. We're now in the low 70s, numbers 73 through 71, and finally getting to a few, maybe a little more familiar names because they're guys that have been on the Seahawks roster before this season. And we're going to start with somebody who was born to be a Seahawk coming up in the Tacoma area, Matt Gotel. They list him at 340. I think he's probably a couple Big Macs from 360, and he moves extremely well for a player of that size. And Rob, you've gotten to see him from a more intimate stage than what I have, obviously, coming up in the Tacoma area. But he's been with the Seahawks now for a couple years in the practice squad, got to suit up for a few games last year. We saw him play well in the preseason, still a pretty young player that came from a Division II school in Florida, went all the way across the country, and then came back to Seattle with the Seahawks. This player, Gotel, if Jonathan Hankins had not been signed in free agency, I think we're having a different conversation. But you've got Jonathan Hankins. Cameron Young's going to be coming back, apparently from an injury. Did not participate in OTAs and minicamp, but they're expecting he's going to be ready early in camp to return to the field. You've got those two. Jaron Reed can play the nose tackle spot. Byron Murphy can play nose tackle. We saw him do it at college level. Leonard Williams has done it. So it's hard to envision Gotel, even if he takes a significant step forward, it's hard to envision without injuries him getting onto this 53-man roster. But it feels like a really strong candidate to continue to stash and develop on your practice squad.
Yeah, I think that is well said. I think that there is a good possibility that's where Gotel is going to wind up here. But, again, the Seahawks are kind of counting on a veteran in Jonathan Hankins, especially, to kind of be able to boost a run defense that was horrific a year ago. And Matt Gotel has the size and the power. He's got surprising quickness for a man of his size. He just doesn't have sustained speed. So, of course, in playing the nose guard position, you're essentially only going to be asked to basically play for, those couple of gaps on his left and his right. And so I do believe that he can do that. He has, again, proven it already that he can play that role. I just don't know that you're going to get much else out of him. And so he, to me, is one of those guys, if there is any type of significant injury to a Jonathan Hankins, we talked about the fact that Cameron Young is coming off of an injury, was not at the mini camps. And so that is something that bears watching. But the fact that Leonard Williams and I almost said Casey Hampton there, because that is exactly the role that I think that Byron Murphy may play in that nose guard position, is occasionally playing that nose guard role that Casey Hampton, a former All-Pro player for the Pittsburgh Steelers, played. He has very similar size as Byron Murphy. Because of all of those bodies, I do think it's going to be difficult for Matt Gotel to actually make this 53-man roster. But because there's not a lot of clubs out there who are running the traditional 3-4 defense the way the Seahawks are, because there's not a lot of pass rush ability from Matt Gotel, he is kind of a specialist in a way, then I do think that he might be somebody that you might be able to stash, be able to kind of keep. And I think that he might consider staying here just because, as you mentioned, he is a local product. And again, somebody that I think fits in with Seattle system and might be somebody that, while he could be on the practice squad, could absolutely be somebody that gets that promotion and winds up playing a key role for the Seahawks when needed.
Let's head over to the receiver position now, away from the trenches. And we've talked about the depth that Seattle has amassed in this position. And one of the things that kind of intrigued me a little bit when we were watching minicamp is that Cody White, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, also played college ball at Michigan State. He's been with the team for a while now. They signed him last year. He was on the practice squad. They re-signed him on a reserve futures deal. in January. And we're talking about a little bigger receiver, and Seattle doesn't have a ton of guys that fit that bill behind DK Metcalf. That's something we've talked about. Laviska Shenault certainly helps in that category, another bigger body, tall, athletic, strong receiver. But Cody White is a player that got some first-team reps in minicamp. Now, Tyler Lockett didn't get a lot of snaps. DK Metcalf got a handful of snaps. Jack Smith and Jigba exited the last minicamp practice for precautionary reasons. He's fine. But Cody White got some reps with the first team, and this is a player that has actually played in a handful of NFL games for the Pittsburgh Steelers previously. So I look at him in a similar situation to Matt Gotel, where I'm struggling to find a roster spot for him, but special teams is always an equalizer here, and Cody White has played some special teams. He's got size. There's a little bit of building rapport with Geno Smith from them working together dating back to last season on the practice field. Not a lot of reps, but clearly they've gotten to work together some. So those things are working to his advantage. It feels like this is another player, though, that has a practice squad spot ready for him. And receivers, it's a lot easier to do that normally because there is such a saturation of good receivers in the NFL.
There really is. And Cody White, he's 6'3", he's 215 pounds. He just doesn't have that elite straight line speed. He catches the ball pretty well. He's a special teams guy, as you mentioned. He is physical in run blocking, and he can be physical after the catch as well. That's one of the reasons why I was especially intrigued to hear of him earning those first team reps. It's just to the Seahawks are giving him his opportunity. And as you mentioned, he played with the Pittsburgh Steelers last couple of years. Hell, he started a game for the Steelers, a couple of years ago. So he does have some starting experience. Again, as you said, when you have a DK Metcalf and you don't have many other wide receivers that have real size to him, Jake Bobo has height, but he's not a real physically built kind of a guy. I mean, he has the best hands of anybody on the team, in my opinion, but he is not a guy who bounces off of contact consistently, is able to generate yardage after the catch. That is something that Cody White did very well at Michigan State. His first 3 years there, he actually left early to the NFL, wound up going undrafted, actually was signed initially by the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's bounced around the couple of different clubs. To me, it makes sense that he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers because they play the same kind of bruising type of ball that Mike McDonald's looking to bring to Seattle. So I would say that I think that Cody White is a practice squad candidate at this point. But again, his size and special teams acumen, I think, gives him a chance. And clearly the Seahawks are intrigued enough to be giving him some first team reps.
One of the positions that underwent the greatest transformation this offseason was on defense. It was the safety spot. Not quite as full scale of change as we saw at inside linebacker, but you lose Jamal Adams, you lose Quandre Diggs, releasing both those players as cap casualties. You sign Rayshon Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace. Ty Okada is coming back for his second season with the organization. Didn't make Seattle's roster out of camp, but got to suit up for 5 games last year for the Seahawks and played a fair amount of special team snaps. And when you go back and you look at the film at Montana State where he played college ball, there's some film of him playing high-level free safety and strong safety. Even though he's not the biggest guy, he'll come down and he'll hit you. There's some pass rushing production as a blitzer. There's ball production, forced fumbles. Okada, of the 3 players in this list, at least in my opinion, safety feels like one of those spots. Kayvon Wallace signed in free agency, but hey, you've got Kobe Bryant that's still there trying to find a spot on this football team. Ty Okada and Jonathan Sutherland both being second-year safeties. It feels like a spot, especially if Jarek Reed II isn't able to get back from a torn ACL during training camp in the preseason and he starts on the PUP list. This feels like a spot that could be right for there to be a surprise player make the roster. And I could see Ty Okada very easily doing that because he's got NFL special teams experience. He's a physical player that has some ball skills, some of that interchangeability that is going to be a premium at the safety spots in Mike McDonald's defense. So I would not rule out Ty Okada. Right now, he would be a player that would be on the outside looking in, but I think he is very much on that bubble because this is a position where I could see there being some surprises down the line on who makes the football team.
I agree. I think that Ty Okada is kind of one of those one of those players that a lot of Seahawks fans don't know about, but the Seahawks absolutely know about. As you mentioned, he was active and playing on special teams, for the Seahawks just this past season. And this is a dynamic athlete now. And this is a guy who's 5'11", 195 pounds, running the 4.4s, had a 40.5-inch vertical, had a 3.98 second short shuttle, a 6.85 second three cone drill. Those are both spectacular times. Those are wide receiver times and good receiver times at that. This is a guy who starred at free safety primarily at Montana State. And I was surprised when the Seahawks played him up in close to the box as much as they did. But then you saw the physicality with which he played. Some of the biggest hits that were delivered on special teams a year ago were delivered by number 39, Ty Okada. So the fact that Jonathan Sutherland, as you mentioned, another former free agent, previously at Penn State, made some splashy plays a year ago. The fact he's coming off of injury, Jarek Reed is coming off of injury. That Jonathan Sutherland was, released from this squad, and the Seahawks kept Ty Okada over him as far as the practice squad, at least initially. There is a possibility that Okada makes a splash in preseason again, as he did a year ago, winds up making this team outright. At this point, I think that he is one of my favorites personally for the practice squad, and I think that he has the ability to come in and again be an interchangeable safety. As we've talked about so many times, Corbin, Mike McDonald likes to use a 3 safety look, and so to me, Okada is definitely a player that Seahawks fans should be getting to know and paying attention to throughout the training camp and preseason process.
He's got that chip on his shoulder, and he's got the versatility and the special teams ability. He checks off those 3 boxes, which is a backup safety playing for Mike McDonald. Those are characteristics that are going to endear to him. If the production's there in the preseason and he plays one training camp, I would keep a close eye on Ty Okada, who could be a dark horse to watch to make this football team. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We're going to continue our training camp preview tomorrow. We're going to be going over to the defensive line with the interior defensive line, the defensive tackles and nose tackles, the big and heavies, the buffet bashers of the defense. We'll get to that on tomorrow's episode. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.